Hello, welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Please leave a kind review if you'd like. If you didn't like the podcast, well, I'm sorry. um, I want to let you guys know, wow, today is the day, March 15th. My album has dropped. It's available. You can listen to it right after this podcast. Go to Amazon, go to iTunes. My debut album, live from January 6th, is out today. I feel like this has been such a buildup. Um, yes, it's on iTunes, it's on Amazon. Pick it up now. Super funny, I've been told. I've listened to like half of it. I was there. I was at the recording. I know it went well, but it's hard to just like listen to your own thing. But it's great. It's so fun. I'm so excited to share it with you guys. And I've got a bunch of shows coming up. I'm going to be on the road this week. I'll be in Raleigh 317 at Good Nights. Then I'm heading to Georgia on March 19th. I'll be at the Wormhole. Then I'm heading to Tampa, Florida to perform at Side Splitters. I think it's at the Wellesley Chapel location, and that's on March 20th. And then Comedians of the Compound will be back in Atlantic City, the Claridge Hotel and the Celebrity Theater, April 22nd and 23rd. I believe that's also going to be Anthony Cumia's birthday party / birthday show. So that's going to be a wild one. For tickets, go to chrissiemayr.com. For the Comedians of the Compound shows, go to compoundcomedy.com. Would love to see you guys at an upcoming show. A quick word from our sponsor. Guys, we all have heard of so many people making crazy money from crypto, but did you know that it's easy for you to do the same? The Copy My Crypto membership site allows you to copy the exact cryptos that James McMahon, he's a famous YouTuber, what he personally holds, and allows you to just copy him. It's like having a smarter, better older brother who knows what he's doing. You don't have to know a thing about crypto or investing. You just simply do what he does. So I'll tell you a little bit more about James. He runs the he runs the Crypto with James YouTube channel, which despite heavy censorship has over 15,000 subscribers and 1 million views. Since March of 2020, he's told his viewers to buy 26 crypto coins. Had you put $100 into each one, this is crazy, it would now be worth over 66K. Of the 26 coins, his top pick of the year, a coin called Phantom, is currently up 440 times from when he started. That one call alone has retired a number of people, including guys and girls in their 20s and 30s. This is wild. I wish I knew about crypto in my 20s. Remember, this is public knowledge. You can go to YouTube and verify this for yourself. So if you'd like to join the 1,300 members who copy James, stop what you're doing and head over to copymycrypto.com/Mayr. That's spelled Mayr. You'll not only find proof of everything I've said, but my listeners get full access for just $1. You won't find this offer anywhere else, but act fast because this is a new year offer and it will expire soon. That's copymycrypto.com/Mayr. Don't take this offer lightly. He's the real deal. Go visit the site now. Okay, guys. I am so excited to have this legit journalist, like legit, not what I do, legitimate journalist on the show today. She is the politics editor at Breitbart News. She's also worked for the New York Post. So happy to have her here today. Emma Jo Morris. Hello. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't know. I think it depends who you ask if I'm a real journalist, but thank you.
Okay, good. No, I think I think my viewers would all confirm that you're very legit. So I mean, there's so many interesting stories that you've been working on and kind of breaking and becoming more well known for. But can you tell me a little bit about how you got into this? Like, did you always want to be a reporter? Did you always have an interest in politics?
Yeah, I definitely always had an interest in politics. I was brought up in Montreal in Canada, and I always felt like it was clown world. You know, I didn't relate to the politics there. It's obviously very liberal. Like it's much worse than even any of the cities in the United States. Like there's no conservative gatherings. There's no conservative communities. And I was always conservative. So I always felt like, you know, my values were at odds with my society, and I found that interesting. But I was like such a degenerate in university. I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of like wandering around.
God, we all were. You're not qualified to pursue higher education at 17, 18 years
Oh,
old.
no, absolutely not. I was not responsible enough to wander into class, that's for sure. But I figured it out. And when I graduated, I just kind of fell into a role. I got picked up by Fox News, and I was hired to be a producer on Hannity. So I was like, okay, like I'll take that opportunity and see what happens. I had no idea how to produce.
Did you major in communications or politics?
Poli-sci.
Okay, poli-sci.
Yeah, I'm a big fancy BA holder.
Same. So you're a political scientist.
That's it, exactly. Really deep. And yeah, so I ended up at Hannity. I was there for 4 years. I loved it. They taught me everything. Like I came in like a newborn baby. They taught me all of any marketable skill I have. I probably originally learned at Hannity. I loved it there. But then I ended up connecting with a New York Post columnist that I'm sure your audience is familiar with, Miranda Devine. She became something like a mentor and a friend, and a position opened up to be the deputy political editor at New York Post. And she was like, you got to apply. This could be your role. They didn't have much conservative direction there at the time. And I just kind of put in an application, and I connected again with the politics editor and the managing editor. We got along, and they were like, okay, I was like, I think 26. They were like, you're 26, but come on. And so I led the politics coverage, the national politics coverage at the Post.
Were you considered kind of like on the younger side? Did you feel like, what was the feeling from your coworkers? Like, what are you doing here? What could you possibly know about life? You're 26, you're a woman.
Yeah, a little bit of that. I mean, the Post actually, formerly, she just left, but the Post was run by a woman who was, no nonsense, very strong, incredible news hound. Michelle Gotthelf was the former editor-in-chief there, who ultimately hired me. And she was a little bit like, how old are you? But they saw that I had a nose for stuff that their audience was looking for. So they kind of just took the chance. And I think I put them a little bit in a fast lane. I don't know if they were expecting me.
I've always enjoyed and appreciated the Post's kind of like blunt honesty, like the tone, which you don't. And I was like raised like in college, reading the New York Times. I had an art history teacher who would be like, if you guys aren't reading the New York Times every day, you're disgusting idiots. Like he just really would shame us. So classic, like there's nobody more unnecessary than an art history professor, and it's just like the fact that he would shame us that like we were never going to make it unless we inhaled the New York Times every day.
Literally, exactly. And that's, you know what I mean? So the Post was kind of catering to like everyone else in New York, like the boroughs and kind of like the tabloid people and the working people, and
like, tell us what's really going on. What's going to affect us? What's going on with crime? Like, don't just pretend that there's no crime happening.
Exactly. We're definitely not sitting, I mean, we do have an office on 6th Avenue, but they weren't sitting there stroking their beards. That's for sure.
Wow, that's really cool. So working at the Post at 26, were you getting to see a lot of New York City? Did you feel like
I actually, I got hired literally. I started the second week of lockdown.
Whoa.
So it was like completely remote. It was, I mean, I guess it was one way to see New York City and learn about New York City, from like the local paper sense, because I mean, it was a historic time, especially for New York City. Like at the time, New York was obviously getting hit basically the worst in the country with COVID. It was a surreal dystopia like that you would read about in like a sci-fi, but
oh yeah, I would get out at Grand Central to do my show at Compound Media on Mondays, and I just, for longer than I realized, it went on longer than I thought, even when things were getting more normal. Just Grand Central Terminal would be completely just barren, like nobody around at all for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it was weird, but so yeah, so I was just there and kind of trying to get used to the world in the city and covering the city. But I mean, my focus was really also on national. But then, I got a call. I have Hunter Biden's laptop. And
who called you? Undisclosed number.
I've told this story publicly before, but I'll tell it again for your listeners. It's quite a remarkable story. I used to hang out with this guy named Vish Burra, who now works for Matt Gaetz. But at the time that we met, he wasn't in politics at all. And I had just kind of moved to the city. This was like 2016, 2017. And we used to hang out and go for brunch. And he was just fun. We knew each other through kind of like mutual friends. And then he went to go years later work for Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon was the one, well, Rudy and Steve were the ones that originally had the laptop. They got it from the repair guy. And Vish was working for Bannon at the time. I didn't know him. I'd met him before, but I didn't know him. And Vish goes to Bannon, like, my girl at the Post, like, she's got to do this story. You got to call her. So I get this call from Steve, and he said, I'm going to change your life. Just stay on the phone. I have the story that's going to change your life. And
you're like, great, I'm about to buy a timeshare. Here we go.
Yeah, right? And, you know, he like has kind of like fancy language that he'll use, you know, he's
dramatic.
Yeah, exactly, flowery. And so
it sounds like you were perhaps the first person or among the first to be notified of said laptop.
That's right. Yeah. At the same time, they were kind of shopping to, I think, the Daily Mail and Fox, but understandably, like, they were like, what is this?
So was this October 2020?
Well, at the time, yeah, this is like beginning of September 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, this story is just too, like, I don't believe you.
How was it framed to you? Like,
I think we've lost our host. I guess I'll just continue this story, and we'll have to fill her in. But so I get this call from Bannon. I didn't believe it. You're back. I was just continuing the story for our audience. I didn't want to have dead air.
See, what I tell you guys, I'm a fucking pro. And I was like, does my internet get cut out when I talk about certain things? Who knows?
Yeah, right. It's the feds.
Yeah, I was just about to show you. A fan made this for me.
Oh,
and it's one of my prized possessions. It is it's my Hunter Biden action figure. He arrived with just in his underpants.
I was gonna say that's a lot of clothing.
He arrived, yeah, this was his original form. Yeah, shout out to Andy Masterson, who, after I kind of did an unboxing of this, like, he sold, I think, a good 15 or 20 of these. He was like, they're not for sale. And he got so many orders. Okay, so here's how he came.
That's it. I want one. I'm jealous.
And it came with like a little crack pipe, a laptop.
Amazing. Well, you can't have the laptop. He's parted with the laptop.
Right? This was like his new. And then it was like an idiot's guide to Ukraine. Oh, so good. It's just, he made these tiny little accessories.
We can all be an expert.
And I was like, I know everything I need to know now. And this makes a great Christmas gift. I think he sold a lot of them.
Nice.
Okay, so you were saying that you got this call, and how was it positioned to you?
It's kind of too good to be true. We're going back and forth. I'm like, explain yourself, you know, and whatever. Long story short, they're like, okay, the physical laptop is with Rudy's lawyer in Long Island, which, for people who don't know New York City, that's like an hour away from Manhattan. So
that's where I'm from. Yeah, Strong Island. You have to cross a sea of self-tanner.
Yeah. Trudging through.
Cross Island Expressway. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like a whole thing to get out there. I'm like, I'm about to go. I call Vish up, and I'm like, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yes. Go nuts.
So I call Vish up, and I'm like, hey, you know, we've been friends for way longer than you've been with Steve. You know, we go back, and I knew you before any of this, and I need you to tell me right now, as a friend and not as Steve's employee, are you fucking with me? Because my boss now knows about this. I'm about to take like an hour-long trip out to Long Island, and then obviously an hour back, and the whole meeting and the whole thing. Like, I'm about to waste hours of my time. Is this real? And I need you to just tell me honestly. And he goes, this is like so incredible. He's like, you know, you grew up in like a nice neighborhood, which I did. And he's
in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, you grew up in a nice neighborhood and I didn't. And he's like, I'm going to tell you, like, you don't know crackheads and I do. And this story makes sense.
You're about to get to know one. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, this is just what crackheads do. They like can't get their lives together. They can't get their shit together. Like they leave things places and have no
They
concept
come
of
in
like
all shapes and
what's going
sizes,
on.
colors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just like because I was like, this guy just left his like corruption riddled laptop, you know, at the like he was like, yeah,
And
no, that's
how
literally
long? Like, I've left stuff at Best Buy. Like, how long until it's considered abandoned? I mean, the guy,
90
that's the thing,
days.
when you're
90
rich,
days.
you have, you lose a laptop like you lose, I don't know, like a pair of socks, and you're like, I'll just get a new one.
Right. It's not even
Yeah.
like it's literally like he just couldn't. And like he said this in interviews since. He's like, yeah, like I couldn't get my pants on, you know. Like he was obviously totally degenerate at the time. I mean, unclear whether he still is, but at the time he was just like not functioning. And this was just part of that, like not functioning lifestyle. So anyway, I'm like, okay, fine. So I go out and look at it. I at first took some materials from it, just on like a USB to show my boss because everybody obviously is like, no, like what is, you know? So I took some stuff to bring back to show, you know, my editors and
And you weren't at Breitbart yet. You were still at the Post.
yeah, this is all
Yeah.
the post. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I took it to show them and uh at first there was like it was slow. We were like freaking out about legal, like what does this mean? How legit is this contract that he signed with the computer repair guy to abandon it? Like who owns this material now? What can we show? Whatever. And anyway, after a lot of that, Miranda ended up getting looped in by Rudy, and it was just let's go. And my boss actually said to me, she was like, because I was finding everything on there. I mean, there were deals that had materialized, deals that hadn't materialized, you know, tons of different countries that he's dealing with and whatever. And my boss goes to me and she goes, I don't need Hunter Biden being a consultant. She was like, I need news. And
Wow.
so I
You
had,
probably get so excited, like, there's so much
well,
stuff.
that's it, exactly. I'm like,
You
like,
you probably didn't have time to look
it's
through
pretty
all of
overwhelming.
it. Where do you even begin? Like, were things I'm imagining crackheads are probably not the most organized, so probably the desktop, there were probably not a lot of folders. There's probably was it like, when you see somebody's computer and it's just, like, files all over the screen
Yeah, like a
covering
reflection of their brain.
and I'm like, "Oh my god, we need some folders in here."
Yeah, so that's yeah, exactly. So it was a disaster. It was hundreds of thousands of documents, hundreds of thousands of emails, PDFs, images. I mean, a lot of the stuff there was like, as we published in the post, like there was a breakdown of this deal he was doing with China that was like written on a notepad, and then he took a picture of it, and it was in his camera roll, like what like the breakdown of like the shares would be. It was like
So, it was like a grocery list, basically.
yeah, like actually, exactly. It was like some of it was just so, I mean, he is degenerate. Like his laptop looked like that. And so, you're going through this trove of stuff, and I'm just calling her, being like, I got Romania, and she's like, no, I don't care that he's consulting. Like, we know this. It's not news that he's consulting with weirdos. It's like, give me something new, give me something explosive. And so I was like, okay.
How do you find what explosive is? So if it was given to be like sort of common knowledge that like that family is involved, like with Ukraine, like we all knew that like he was, what was he on the board of an oil company or something? Like it was like major news a couple years ago, and maybe this was during the Obama years. I mean, you could argue we're still in the Obama years, but he said, "Oh, like I wouldn't give him the $1 million unless they fired that guy," and they fired him, and he bragged about like that he held money over
right, exactly. But
somebody's head to get
that's
somebody
obviously
fired.
what she kind of meant. She was like, find something
Like
good. Yeah. And so I just started looking at, I started with Ukraine exactly because there was that comment from Joe Biden. I was like, I wonder if there's more to that. And I started looking into that. And then all of a sudden, that was our first story. Thank you so much. I appreciated meeting your father. And that was our first story. And then
and who was saying that?
That was Vadim or whatever, the Burisma guy.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the meeting with your father. And then I was like, oh, dad's involved. And then we had story number 2, which was the next day, 10% held by H for the big guy. And I was like, okay, Joe Biden's all over this. And like, once you've got a thread and you start pulling.
And were these emails or were these more cocktail napkins with?
These are emails.
Okay. Right. Wow, it almost seems, like, so intimidating. Did you ever think, like, "This is so big, I'm in over my head, like, what am I
Of
now
course.
vulnerable? Am I now, like, do I have a
Of
target on my
course.
back?"
Yeah, I mean, first of all, with a story that big, you're not sleeping the night before, and we did all the due diligence, obviously, that we could to confirm it. But you never know. What if I'm interpreting it wrong? What if I'm like conspiracy brain? What if there's a reasonable explanation for all of this and I'm going to look like an idiot? All of those things go through your head. But ultimately, it's like, this has never been reported. This is obviously newsworthy. We have an election in 2 weeks or whatever it was, 3 weeks. And, I felt like it was a personal responsibility to like do my job. And there was obviously great risk that I thought of. I wrote a reflection a year after this all happened. So I guess the last October that just passed, and I was going through like a lot of the documents and texts from that time, and I had this text from Steve the night before we went, and he was like, "There's a price of admission to the show, but you're gonna be fine."
How cryptic! I love how he talks in haikus.
And like IRL, that's actually how he speaks.
Yeah, I love it. He's like such a flair for the dramatic.
Yeah, but you gotta love it. I mean, exactly. Flair is so the word.
This is
It's
so
fun.
neat. And I remember when the story came out, nobody wanted to touch it. Everyone was saying immediately fake news. And then there were rumors that there was like pedo material on there. There were like I remember there was this website that because I've got all sorts of people sending me all sorts of stuff and that I have to comb through. And some folks were saying, you got to go to this, I think it was GTV website, and then you can see some of the things that have been leaked. And that's where we saw the first, I think, selfie of Hunter, like classic underwear shot with the scarf, selfie in the mirror. And then someone saw, oh, is this a picture of him and Malia Obama? Oh, is that Lady Gaga? There were all these rumors of like who was in these pictures, what was going on. Was it straight up just like adult man party stuff, or was it pedo stuff? I'm like, you figure this guy is incredibly rich and connected. He could have crazy drug filled parties like every night of the week
Yeah, there
and
was
not
that.
miss a beat.
There was a lot of weird stuff that was going around at that time. I can't speak to what was on GTV. I actually didn't even look. I was involved with the actual laptop. But,
Yeah.
I didn't see that myself, but there was really weird stuff circulating at the time. There was a lot of disinformation about it that, that the laptop obviously was real, but there was a lot of weird stuff being said about it or being released ostensibly, that it was part from the laptop and it wasn't. But I think that there were probably people out there who were trying to take stuff that was really in the laptop and then mix in things that weren't, and to try to discredit the work. I don't know who or what or where it was coming from, obviously, but I did see a lot of that, and it was nonsense. It was bullshit. And but yeah, obviously there was a lot of partying, a lot of hookers. There was absolutely no child porn. I want to say that for the record. Absolutely not, even remotely.
From everything you saw, I mean, you
I saw the
yeah.
entire thing. I had
Okay.
all of it in my possession, the entire
Okay.
thing. I can say unequivocally right now, absolutely not. That's preposterous.
Well, that's a relief.
Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. He's a scumbag, but that's
But you would think, given the last 2 years and some of my, like, even if you listeners older than me, like, the longer you live, the more wise you get just to everything that's how the world works. And you're like, "Oh, well, if this was going on, if this disgusting stuff was going on, these people could absolutely hide it from the world, even if there was hard proof of it."
yeah,
It's just one of the things that kind of makes you a cynical adult. You're just
of
like, "Oh,"
course. And you see,
you
like,
know?
you see people getting away with murder all the time. And I understand that feeling, obviously, of course. And I understand, seeing a deluge of information and not knowing what to make of it. But no, that's absolutely not true. And I'll say it
Okay.
now on air, live. This is raw and uncut.
Live
There's
for
no
100 or so people.
That's it, exactly.
So,
Let them
and
all tell a friend.
and this is from an article, talking about how you kind of got into this. Social media giants quickly put a chokehold on Morris's work covering the Biden family corruption, preventing it from gaining traction, while establishment left-wing outlets like Politico and The Times smeared her reporting. They called you spreading Russian misinformation. They called it unsubstantiated. But that tells us that you were onto something, because we've noticed the trends over the other stuff that's happened over the last 2 years, maybe a global health issue, that when you're onto something, they call it misinformation.
Yeah, it's textbook at this point, and it's sad, honestly, because people end up turning to crazy and believing crazy things because they don't have any solid, reliable source of information in their lives, which is actually really sad and not something that people deserve in America. But yeah, they were like attacking me. They were like, she's too young to have reported this, or she's from Hannity, it must be an op, or like they were making up conspiracy theories about me, which were like dumb. As if like you have to be like a learned scholar to like read emails. But you know what I mean? It's like
okay. Isn't that what they said about Chelsea, about Hillary's emails? Like at one point, a mainstream news channel saying, if you read them or see them, that's a crime. Let us do that.
Hear about it from the news.
Let Daddy read the emails.
Exactly.
We'll explain them.
Yeah, exactly. So there was like a lot of that. It was like really weak. The Biden family did not deny any of it. They were like, this looks like Russia. And then, Politico came out with that piece that kind of helped, buttress the narrative that big tech was using to censor us, which was like 20 former CIA agents say that this has the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, but then like in graph 15, it's like, but we haven't seen it and we don't know that. We're just assuming or whatever. It was really pathetic. Wow. It was honestly, it was a disgrace. It was really one of the low moments, I think, for American media in many years. And that's saying something,
Was it just
it was Russia hoax level. It was,
okay.
I mean, they had like former CIA agents like Michael Hayden and Brennan, like coming on the record to Politico, making things up out of whole cloth that they admitted, but buried that paragraph saying that. It was totally, it was totally surreal. It was very intense. But the Post had my back. And so any of these accusations about me or my politics or my ability to read emails or whatever was just kind of like shrugged off. They
had your back.
Yeah, well, of course. And it's not like I tweeted this stuff out without their permission. I mean, the Post at every level was involved in this work. And there were many tiers of approval, obviously, before we were going to publish anything like this. It's like, yeah, like we worked together on it. We were in it together. And, I was on the phone with my boss, the fantastic Michelle Godhelf, really, honestly, one of the most incredible people I've ever met and one of the strongest reporters and just editors and managers. Really incredible. She was on the phone with me all the time being like, screw this, whatever, you're right. Let them find a hole in the story, and it was really cool. And that is what journalism is really about, is you don't retract because of public pressure. This is a matter of true and false. There was nothing that was even attempted to be made like falsified about it. Like it was clearly bulletproof, clearly. And slandering me or slandering the story or calling me Russian or whatever, like that doesn't count as falsifying the story or rebutting the story. So we did not retract one comma, and they had my back 1,000%. It was chill.
Well, we know the tactics of like the mainstream media and the left is basically to criticize your character, to demonize you as a person. Like they don't want to get in refuting the information. That takes too long to prove the truth of anything. They just want to like take you down as a person, slap a bunch of insults and names on you, and that's
it's pathetic. It's really pathetic. And it's like these people are ostensibly the intellectuals of our society. It's like ridiculous. They're a joke.
Do you know if the Post was the only one to really pick up the story? To your knowledge, were any other outlets?
We were the only ones.
That's crazy.
After that, and then like a couple days later, Tony Bobulinski comes out and like he did that primetime interview with Tucker, and he did a press conference in primetime, being like, "Yeah, I'm CC'd on these emails. This is all real. The big guy is Joe Biden, and it's so much worse than you can imagine."
I think even the average person took away from all of that, like, all right, the Biden family is heavily financially invested in the Ukraine. I would say that's probably the bare minimum of a takeaway that the average like American voter. Maybe that's too much credit, but like,
well, that's the
wouldn't
takeaway.
it,
That's the main takeaway. You know, you don't
oh,
have the characters and the
you never
details.
know.
The moral of the story is, yeah, of course, they're very heavily invested in
Do you think
Ukraine.
that just doesn't phase the average person? Do you think they're probably just cynical and like, well, every president is corrupt. Every president has dealings with some country, but it's like it was like Biden's. It was like wasn't Pelosi's family involved in the Ukraine too? It wasn't there like there's like a I feel like there's a bunch of kind of
I think
elite
Ukraine is
level.
the kind of like a cesspool of American and probably global corruption. I mean, it's like that, and like I tweeted this today, like that and Russia are the two most corrupt countries literally in Europe. I mean, everyone
Yes,
has hands in there.
I saw this. I'm gonna
Um,
pull up your Twitter feed. If you're not following Emma Joe now, I don't know what you're waiting for.
yeah, you got the spiciest take on
Spiciest
Twitter.
takes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
the two most corrupt countries are Europe. In Europe are Russia and Ukraine. The war is tragic and horrific and sad, and innocents, as always, are the biggest victims. We can't even begin to understand what's really going on with it. And what I like to pose with right now is like the social media and the legacy media's pressure on everyday people to you have to be the biggest fan of Ukraine. I got into an actual like kind of an argument on my very lighthearted sex dating relationship show. It's called Wet Spot. It was last night, and I wore as a joke. I got this shirt printed that said "Rootin' for Putin." Like I don't know anything. I'm a comedian. Like I don't know. I don't really know what's
it's
going
like,
on, but I know that everyone who's been pushing Ukraine for me to support the Ukraine are the same people who've been lying to me the last 2 years about everything that's been going on. I don't trust or respect these people. So it's like, why would I support the meme of I support the current thing? This is like the black square all over again.
exactly.
Why would I? And so I'm just wearing this like rooting for Putin shirt. I'm like, why not? It's funny. And then like a couple of my guests, like we got into it and oh, you can't support them. Oh, I'm like, really, Bill? This is like my buddy. And it is well, whatever. It's no big deal. It was Bill Schultz. He used to work for Fox. He has a show on Compound, and I was like, "How are you supporting the Ukraine? Are you sending them money? Like, any of our like support is actually bullshit, and none of us have an effect on anything that's going on. Like, even if you were to be like, I don't know, PayPaling the Ukraine, I don't even know what you would do. Like,
Yeah.
the idea of the support being for or against. I think it's mostly bullshit and a huge distraction. Like most of us
Yeah,
have no clue what's going on.
that's it. It's like I think it's just so corrupt. It's impossible to understand what's happening. Nothing is as it seems. Nothing is being presented straight. So that's all I have to say about it on Twitter is like
Yeah.
I don't know how you take an informed position because there is no way to know. But just to what we were talking about before, I just pulled this up. Just following the election, basically, this pollster, McLaughlin and Associates, conducted a poll. Because obviously it was totally censored from Twitter and Facebook. So they conducted a poll asking Biden voters if they had heard the story of from the laptop from hell, and it showed that 36% of voters were not aware of the expose at all. And then
Ooh, that's a
yeah,
lot.
36%, which is high. And then and then obviously, liberal media, like legacy media, isn't covering it. So they would have had to have seen it basically on social media, and they were robbed of that opportunity. So that's 36%. And then they took that 36% and showed them the articles and basically read them to them. And they've concluded that of the 36%, 13% of them said that they would not have voted for Joe Biden if they had known.
Wow, it actually would have made a difference.
A difference, we would have had a different president. Such a shift away
Whew.
from Biden would have meant President Trump would have won the election with 289 electoral votes, was the conclusion. That's a quote from the study.
And how many do you need to win?
270.
270? God, I mean, I feel like so many things helped tip the scales in old Biden's favor. But that
That's it.
is
It's like when we talk, like people talk about like election interference or whatever, and like I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in Arizona or whatever, but to me, like that is what it's about. It's straddling information that people need to make an informed decision, which
right.
is obviously intentional. In fact, Molly Ball from Time Magazine wrote an entire piece bragging about it.
Yeah. You're actually like keeping people from getting news that would affect their decisions.
Yeah,
They're like, no, we know better.
obviously, I mean, this whole story was disgusting, obviously, and people don't like to be played. So when they see that this is going on and he's, skimming off the top in Ukraine, he's skimming off the top in China, plus like all of this stuff on this computer, which is hugely embarrassing to the family. If I have it, I'm some random chick in like Williamsburg, like, that like people who are actually going to have a problem with us have it.
Right. I always say, as far as like not even nudes, but just any photo, like, yeah, I mean, like, unless you're okay with it getting out, like, well, he didn't really send them to anybody. He just had, who has pictures on their laptop though? I mean, like, I think
totally unprotected, like just sitting there, like all of the, like, I mean, listen, there was a lot of porn on there, a lot of hookers, a lot of crack. I mean, we published some of it. We published like just that picture alone of him lying in the bed with the crack pipe hanging out of his mouth, and he's
now
like,
it's iconic. Thanks to you, Emma.
Totally. It should be an NFT. Somebody should do that. That's a free idea for our 100 listeners.
Oh, if they discovered this about any of Trump's kids, are you kidding me? It would still be front page news every day.
Which would be impeached and removed rightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously.
And he's just been, Hunter has been given endless passes like, oh, well, this was before he found his art career.
Yeah.
He just needs to find himself.
He was doing his own, like, they don't even address the fact that Joe Biden was obviously involved and obviously taking this money. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. You think a crackhead is going to be able to do deals by himself?
Yeah, the whole thing is just so disingenuous. The whole conversation around it, the coverage is just, it's actually stupid and insulting to people who actually do have intellect, which most American people, the vast majority of American people, have a very high and strong intellect, and they have a strong instinct, and they know when they're being played, and they know when something's not right. And you don't have to have Nicole Wallace or Chris Cuomo come and tell you why it's what, like, people know what to do with information, which is why they have to work so hard to censor it and curate it and make sure that you don't see or you don't look or whatever, because people have good sense. They have a gut. That's something that Americans are really known for, I think, internationally. I mean, that's how I grew up seeing Americans. It's like having really strong instinct, being really strong people, knowing what's right, and having like great clarity.
And that's what everyone loved about Trump. He was like such a straight shooter. He wasn't polished. He talked like a regular person.
Yeah. And the legacy media knows that too, which is why they have to work in overtime and in overdrive to try and, massage information.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And who knows how that knowledge, if more people had that knowledge, how it would have affected, all of our, we have to simp for the Ukraine now. I don't know. I'm so confused by all of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I have no allegiance to Ukraine, and I don't see our national interests there. And I guess that's kind of all I have to say. It's like,
most of my Brazilian waxers have been Russian, so if I had to pick a side. And then the folks at Breitbart, very impressed with you. I believe this is a quote from Breitbart news editor in chief Alex Marlowe. It became obvious to me within minutes of meeting Emma that she wasn't simply a passionate and fearless reporter. She has deeply internalized the lessons of Andrew Breitbart and the editorial voice of the news outlet that bears his name. In the spirit of Andrew, her biggest scoops not only expose political corruption in our midst, but they expose the establishment media as well. The machine-like collaboration among big tech, the corporate media, the intelligence community, and the Democratic Party is one of the stories of the century, and Emma has been right in the middle of it. She has also secured interviews with dissidents from North Korea and, here we go, a word I can't pronounce, Xinjiang, publishing rare insight into some of the most secretive regimes of our time. She's earned her bona fides as a journalist who is not afraid to walk toward the fire, as Andrew famously encouraged us to do. How does it make you feel hearing all that?
I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's talking about me, especially from Alex. Like, Alex is such, he's really been an inspiration to me. He works so hard. First of all, he's not only the editor-in-chief of Breitbart, which is a huge undertaking. I mean, it's a handful out there, but he also runs this podcast every day, Breitbart News Daily, which he just launched. It's like he has a lot going on, and he comes to work like 1000% every day. And he is inspired and coming up with ideas and, prodding us for us to push ourselves and get the Breitbart angle on everything, and it's kind of crazy to hear him speak that way about me. Sometimes I feel like a bit of an imposter, but I mean, I won't get into armchair psychoanalyzing my feelings about it.
Well, it's
Other
always
than to
a
say,
closet answer,
up the post, it's like I was doing well at the post. I had a great post there, and I had a great role, and like we were doing good work. But I got on the phone with Alex, and I don't know, something about it just felt right. I was like, I gotta go work with this guy.
When you say like the Breitbart spirit, what do you mean by that?
Well, so Andrew was his own thing. Andrew was really an enigma, and he was kind of like a lone voice for a long time in the conservative movement for for what is now really mainstream, seeing the media as an arm of the Democratic Party and as a group of activists on behalf of the Democratic Party, which was not mainstream to say at the time that Andrew was coming up in 2010, 2011, 2012. He was a big believer that anybody can be a journalist, that you don't have to have gone to Columbia Journalism School and you don't have to have a master's from Oxford in order to tell a story.
It's not an elitist thing, which is
Yes,
like,
exactly.
I feel
He was so iconoclast that way. He was like, and he would say this, as smartphones were coming up, he was like, anybody with a phone is a journalist. You just record what you see and say what you see. So that was like, but at the time, all of this, like now we say it and it's kind of cliche, but at the time, this was really new, and this was something that was really fringe. And Andrew was just so, a lot of the time too, like there's this really great quote by Andrew where he says, so many people are waking up to say to the mainstream media, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs,
right? Yeah.
Fuck you, and that was a really great clip of Andrew, and it really encompassed like his war with, which is like the big hashtag at Breitbart. He said that about the media. He was like, the media is our biggest problem. The media is exactly kind of what I went through, is like really, that's something that I'm sure Andrew was looking down on in spiritual disbelief. But he said, like, these people are trying to manipulate people. They're activists. They have a total political interest, and the objective journalism is just a mirage. And that was the philosophy that Breitbart was founded on, which is how I'm able to come out and talk about being a conservative and be an editor, which, for traditional journalism, you're not supposed to say. But Breitbart would say, look, these people are all political operatives. They just don't say it out loud. I'm going to start something where we are honest about what we're doing. We're responding to the trends set by the legacy media, and we are conservatives. And we frame things in a conservative way. Our perspective is conservative. Our angle and our tone is conservative. And, we're at least going to be honest with our readers.
Wow.
So he had like a big legacy of walking toward the criticism and saying like, yeah, call me a racist or whatever, a Russian spy, I guess now, because it's 2022, and not letting that dissuade you from being honest about what you see. He had a legacy of saying that journalism is not an elite career, that anybody can do it, and also that the media is a bunch of liars and clowns, and they should be called that with disdain.
That's great. It was basically just like, like journalism for the people, by the people. I love that. Like anybody with a phone.
Populist journalism.
Yeah. Kind of just like, and one of the big things that Trump did for me was like just him saying like fake news. He really just like,
so
I don't know. He put a crack in it and he just kept hammering away. And then you're like, oh yeah, like these folks are telling us how to think about it. And this is going to sashay beautifully into this next topic. But like, so you cover a lot of topics. Well, lately you've been covering a lot of the like the private school teachers being exposed for teaching CRT, for the schools, pushing queer inclusive curriculum. And there was one of the articles that was talking of, I guess these folks had like, or I'm not sure if these were exactly like, they sounded like transcripts of meetings, of school board meetings. And one of them was saying, it was such a good example because it was talking about the Constitution. Like, can the Constitution be a white supremacist document and like a, God, what
Are
was
you
it?
talking about the
And
photo that was in my story?
an aspirational document at the same time. And I'm like, damn.
That was on the teacher's Instagram.
I'm like,
You can
you're not even giving somebody the option to think about the Constitution in their own way. You're telling them, oh, it's obviously white supremacist, but can it be this and this at the same time?
It's
That's like,
beyond parody. And could anything that's a white supremacist document be aspirational? What does that even mean? Is he like comfortable with white supremacy?
oh my God. So this is just the page. Like you're really blowing me away. Like I'm so impressed with you. So here are all the articles written by you on Breitbart, and each one of these is like juicy and explosive and like just jam packed. So I'm gonna start with let's see, I'm gonna start with the one with the CRT. I think that's the most recent one.
Yeah. Yeah, racist. I call it race essentialism because it is. CRT is a fancy way of saying race essentialism.
It's so interesting because for years, like I thought, oh, okay, we're just this is progress, this is progressivism, this is equality, whatever. And then you start like looking into Marxism, you start looking into like rules for radicals, you start like looking into like, no, this is like a very intentional process of making you, beating you down, calling you names, calling you whatever it is, racist, whatever the insult of the week is, beating you down until you actually throw your hands up and you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just I'm just tired. And then that's when people can shape and change culture.
Well, that's the point. That's it.
It's
Exactly.
literally is to beat you down. So this is a crazy hot story. Exclusive footage here. Private school teachers nationwide implementing racist essentialist curricula, and they had a guest come in that was from the Black Panthers, and this was the image here. Can the Constitution be both a white supremacist and an aspirational document at the same time? Like it's this is just wild to me because I used to work in a private, I think it was a NAIS school. It stands for the National Association of Independent Schools. I don't know if they have this in other countries.
This is exactly what these stories are about. National Association of Independent Schools. Yeah.
I worked at a school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It was an all boys private prep school, and I worked in admissions. And this was like 2011, 2012. And just from what I saw, I mean, I wasn't like sitting in the classrooms. To me, this didn't seem as big of a problem. It feels like it's been really ramped up in the last few years. But again, like I'm not a mother, I don't have kids in school.
It apparently got really crazy after George Floyd. I mean, obviously,
Wow.
it was like
Okay.
where it got like, where the horse completely left the stable and it got totally out of control. But yeah, so basically, like these stories are kind of crazy. I'm trying to make a name for myself outside of Hunter Biden dick pics and charisma. But so I picked up this group of moms, and basically, there's this group of mothers who are called the Undercover Mothers because these schools that are associated with this accreditation association, NAIS, they have in the school contracts that you cannot lose confidence is the term that they use with the school. So if you voice any opposition to anything going on, whether it be curricula, school culture, policy, anything, your kid can be expelled. So
Wow.
yeah. It's so the contracts are totally out of control and they put them in a headlock. But anyway, so these women have to be anonymous. So I linked up with a few of them in New York City, and they have this whole network that's moms across the country.
Wow.
And they have basically been trying to figure out, because no matter if you're in Georgia, you're in LA, you're in New York City, you're in Austin, wherever you are, if you're at an NAIS public school, they're seeing the exact same stuff going on, these are supposed to be independent schools. These are supposed to just operate as private schools, obviously, in and of themselves. But they were realizing that there is total similarity, in fact, almost identical experiences going on all across the country. And so they set out to they connect over Signal, and they set out to try to figure out like what is the source of this problem. And they realized that it's the Accreditation Association, it's NAIS. So they literally just sit and do research on this basically constantly. And they are finding stuff that is just so disturbing. It's so disgusting. It's absolutely blood curdling. I mean, the race story is one. That's my last one. I also did one on the gender theory that they're teaching and the sexuality that they're teaching, which is just it's child abuse, obviously. I mean, all of it is, but the sexuality stuff, in my opinion, is some of the worst of it. Although, I mean, how do you really rank between racism and sexual abuse? But that's essentially what, I mean, that is what both of them are. And the stuff that they're teaching kids is so gross, so disgusting. The parents have absolutely no ability to weigh in on any of this ever. In fact, they have conversations, which I record in my stories, of how to avoid parents being involved in any of this and how to conceal from parents and keep opacity between the parents and what is being taught. And it's grooming. You know, I was talking about Breitbart Radio, on the podcast, and it's, you know, the host was Jerome Hudson, who is our entertainment editor at the time, and he was like, "No, this is literally grooming," and it is. I mean, it's really sick stuff, and these women are just so fed up. And let me tell you, this is not a right-wing group at all.
No, at all. And this was formed, I guess, out of New York City originally.
Yeah.
And these are not all conservative moms. These are not all people that are like, well, screw it, we're just going to take our kid out of school, homeschool them.
Yeah, no. These are not, first of all, that is not a thing. Like, it's like, I find like the school of choice stuff and this homeschool stuff, like, it sounds nice, but in reality, it's like, that requires so much. Like, a parent isn't supposed to, like, they shouldn't have to be the teacher in order to have their kid get the education that they think is appropriate.
Not be indoctrinated, right?
That was the point of going to the private school in the first place.
And especially that's the reason why the CRT stuff in the schools is why so many people justify and cut costs in other areas of their life to, like, you know what, it's so important, we got to send our kid, we got to pay for the private school or else they'll be indoctrinated. And now we are hearing with this
that's the thing. And like, you know, it's funny because I'll give you and your viewers a preview. I'm working on a story on that now.
Ooh.
Because I think it's going to be a column, because I'm noticing that, it's like, and this has come up in conversation when I've been talking about these stories, and it just inspired me to maybe write something on this to clarify, so that's what I'm working on now, where, you know, conservatives have this idea that there's some silver bullet for like wokeness and whatever in school and declining standards and bad management. I mean, all of it that you see in the public schools that everybody's really upset about. And they think, okay, school choice, private schools, help people get vouchers, invest in children, as they say, or whatever, invest in students, and send them to privates. But that argument hinges on privates being good.
Right.
And they're not at all. They're actually worse. In fact, there's much less oversight in privates. They have like a board of trustees, which for the most part tend to be, you know, into this as well, or they have the Accreditation Association, which is the source of these problems. That's the oversight that exists in privates. They are worse than publics, actually much worse. And the parents have much less rights. Like what you see in those viral videos where you always see like the parents going and like tearing a strip off these school board people. You don't get that in privates. Privates give parents zero right to talk about what's going on in their kids' education or to question the school or to ask any questions whatsoever.
Despite the fact that they're paying like 30 plus grand a year sometimes.
At least 50. Yeah. Per year, per kid. And they have zero rights. These contracts are so bad. They're really bad. I mean, they don't allow parents, like, they use the words lose confidence. So if you, let's say, go to your school and say, hey, my kid just had to affirm their gender and they're 10. What is that about? What was the context of that? Let's say you just say that. You're not being belligerent. You're not being aggressive. You're not criticizing. You're
asking a question.
Probing. Yeah. And they can consider that grounds for expulsion.
Wow. So they're bullying and intimidating the parents into not asking questions about their kids' curriculum.
That's exactly right. Bullying and intimidating is the word. And obviously these parents pay this money because they want their kids to have the best opportunity to go to good universities, right? And then obviously from there have the best opportunity at jobs. So the whole thing is that they're making all these sacrifices so that their kid can just, you know, go through and have a better opportunity in the future. And they're in this position where it's like, you have to just sacrifice all of that, throw all of the money that you've previously invested in years past in the toilet and shut up.
Right. And it's not feasible for every parent to explore homeschooling. Like a
It's just
lot of times
it's
both
not
parents need to
realistic.
work. Yeah.
But that's it. So that's what I was gonna. That's what I started off saying. Sorry, I got distracted, but get really like hot under the collar on it, and I lose my train of thought. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's school choice is a false choice because that operates on the assumption that private schools are better, and they're just not. They're actually quantifiably and obviously worse. And if conservatives want to get this issue right, which they should definitely be interested in, because there's a lot of pitchfork holding moms right now in this country that would be happy to vote for somebody who wants to deal with this. They need to deal with fixing the private school system, obviously, and getting some intervention in NAIS, because that is like this is the source of the problem. This is where everything is being pushed. This is the source of everything being pushed on the privates. But also, how about also just fixing public schools? Like, it's not, I mean, school choice is great, but there isn't necessarily the infrastructure for like, what is it, like 1.5% of schools to take in all of the kids who are upset, whose parents are upset with the declining standards in publics. How about just fix the problem? Like here's a meal ticket idea isn't that deep. I don't think it goes anywhere.
Yeah. It's definitely seems like a big problem, and unless you're kind of like in it, like you're in the industry, like you are a teacher or know how the administration works. Like I ask my sister about this all the time because she's a teacher out in Vegas, and I remember like when she first started, she was like, "I don't know why, like I'm teaching all the same lessons I taught in New York and the kids aren't really picking it up." Oh, Nevada is like number 50 in the country for education. Okay, most of these kids just become EMTs or they work in the casinos.
Right.
Um,
Right. Which
but
is
she
sad. It's like,
yeah, which is
there are many countries like South Korea is one that's like, obviously the best example, where they don't spend anywhere near the amount of money that we spend on education. Just like, let's just talk about public schools. Like, we spend a tremendous pouring money at this, and the standards are horrible. It's ridiculous. It's highway robbery of taxpayers, and it's really sad for kids, because education, as we all know, is obviously the key to whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best way to have class mobility, is to obviously just teach people to do stuff that they can market. And we're just totally dropping the ceiling on these kids, teaching them about like whiteness and shit. Like,
yeah.
one of the lines that I thought was like one of the most outrageous lines in this entire series was from this teacher who was like a second grade teacher, and she goes, I'm trying to indigenize my curriculum, so I've taken out the word goal, like GOAL, goal.
Yes! Yes, they can't say the word goal anymore
Yeah,
because that's a
because
white
it's too
supremacist
capitalist and
word.
white.
Instead, she was gonna replace this with intention, and I was like, actually,
Intention.
I was like, goal is more firm, and because a goal is measurable,
Well,
and
that's
you
it.
can't measure an intention.
That's it. Exactly. And like, I'm sorry, but what is that really? It's dumbing down kids, and
Yep,
it's taking away motivation to like do something.
that is wild.
And this is what you're paying for? I mean, okay, this is privates. So this is a $50,000 bill that you're getting to teach your kids that we don't have goals, we have intentions. And I mean, it's the same across the board, publics, privates. I mean, this is a huge rot. And this is a huge problem that we have to deal with like yesterday, like now, right now. Because I mean, I don't know, like, what do you do with a society of people that learns this stuff? Like, think about it on a mass scale. It's like disturbing.
Yeah, and it's like, it definitely seems like a good way to take a country down from the inside, just from
That's
an early age, make the kids, like, sexually confused and totally distracted with the idea of, like, sex, gender, whatever, like, thinking about something that never would have occurred to them in their day-to-day. Like, I was a women's studies minor, and we talked about all this stuff. We talked about all, like, transgender, pangender, all that dumb shit, and I just was like, it was completely useless. Like, it did not prepare me for any job. It did not help me. It did not help me with my relationships with people. It didn't make me a softer, kinder, better worker, person, friend. It was like 100% useless. My communications degree almost entirely 100% useless as well. Like any job, I learned on the job training. Like It's
That's it,
wild.
and,
Like,
all of it is really based in resentment and anger. It's,
yes.
not gonna serve anybody for anything, and I understand character building in school and how that is equally or more important than, arithmetic and spelling or whatever, 100%, but this is actually character deterioration. It's turning people into angry, resentful, uh, unlikable and
Mhm.
unfriendly people, and it's like, there is absolutely zero value, and, we were talking about too, and I see in the comments as well, people are talking about communist takeover, elite takeover, which is exactly right. This mother said to me, who, by the way, again, Democrat in LA, said to me when
Mm.
we were working on this series, she was like, if you think about it, this is really brilliant because the private schools are 1.5% of schools in this country, but they have an extremely high rate of graduates who go on to Ivy League schools. And then obviously the Ivy Leagues have an extremely high rate of graduates that go on to work in either Fortune 500 companies or the government. For instance, 1/3 of Biden's cabinet went to an NAIS school currently.
That's why they pay those prices. They do it for the connections. I know from
Exactly.
firsthand working in New York City, they're like, "We're doing this so that you can be connected for life."
Exactly. That's exactly right. So think about how effective it is to just focus energy on those people. And all of a sudden, they are totally ensnared and dyed in the wool in this stuff.
The
And then
future one
they go on
percenters.
to
Yeah.
wield, and they go on to wield the most power over everybody else. So if you've captured those people, you've really captured the entire culture and the entire society almost in its entirety.
And the rest of us are slaves. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, look at what we have right now with Biden's cabinet. They're all CRT worshiping, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Going to the UN or going to the Supreme Court or whatever. Like the Supreme Court, for instance, the Supreme Court justice is being picked based on the first consideration about the person that we're putting on the Supreme Court is her sex and her race.
Who gives a
That's
fuck?
serious though.
Yeah.
That's serious. And so, that's what it looks like when you have people at the highest levels of government and the highest levels of power making decisions based on the stuff that they're teaching kids that we're talking about right now. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make you qualified for anything, obviously.
Why do you need
And
an
I'm sure she
inclusion
must be a
course?
smart woman or whatever, but
Yeah.
even begin consideration from that place is that's not meritocracy. That's not what America's about. And if you make decisions and placements based on that logic, you're going to have a crumbling society imminently and soon.
If I were a Black woman and I would feel so disrespected and condescended to if I heard that any of the jobs or even in comedy, any of the roles or opportunities I got were because of my skin color. I would feel so shitty about that. I would be like, "Oh, wow, so it's not at all about the content, not about how good I am. I'm literally a token."
100%. I feel
And
the
why
same
are
way
we
if
glorifying
I
this?
ever found out that I was hired or considered even for any I would quit. I would be very upset. I would not even accept, any opportunity based on that. I mean, that has nothing to do with me. I mean, it has something to do, whatever, on a superficial way or whatever, but I can't even imagine.
Who
I
wants
feel bad for
Yeah.
this woman knowing that she was only put in the running in the first place because of her race and sex. It's so degrading. It's so gross. I feel really bad for her. I would feel robbed if I were her.
Nobody wants to be a diversity hire, and we definitely don't need this
Totally.
inclusivity, BS in with little kids. Little kids don't get any more you know what I mean? They don't think about that. They literally do not
It's so
care. They're just like, "Who will play with me and who won't?" Like,
yeah.
who is sharing their toys with me? They couldn't care less about what you look like.
That's exactly it, and that's why it's also, really upsetting because it's kids don't even think about that stuff.
And
They
kids
don't
don't think about their
it's their
sex or their identification either. It's literally that is literally one of the best things about childhood is that you can be innocent
exactly.
and not worry about adult stuff. And I think they're setting up a generation of people to be so distracted by their sexual orientation or their gender identification, or so distracted by that they don't actually set goals. They don't pursue greatness. They vilify greatness by saying you can't say the word goal. Doing well is considered white supremacist. That we should just toil in mediocrity, and because that's equitable is
Yeah.
so disgusting to me. But
Oh, 100%, and then it's one thing to do all of that, all of that is gross and wrong and sad, and doing all that and then sitting and plotting how you're gonna hide it from parents. It's
that's so
the
gross.
first thing you teach a kid is the first thing is if an adult asks you to keep a secret, tell us now.
That's grooming, like.
Well, that's it. It's like like you can't take children and hide things that you're telling them from their parents. That is exactly right. That's a predator. That's why you tell kids you have to say immediately if somebody ever asks you to keep a secret. It's completely inappropriate, and that's like rule number one of child abuse and something that you're not supposed to do with kids. So like all of these stories have that. The one about the like sexuality is like so demented. Like I'm just pulling it up right now. So they label it Puritan speak. If you just like scroll down a little bit from where you are, you'll see it.
Is it this one? Is it
a little bit lower? Yeah, one more graphic.
Oh, yeah.
There's the slide. Yeah, that is what they're teaching teachers. They should look out for from parents.
And this is puritanical, aka racist, right? I've never heard anyone say that word in a context that's not about racism. So that you actually just caring about your child is they're making it racist. And
look at like the terms that they use for like, that's my job. They're just not ready. Too much too soon. What if they lose their innocence?
What if my child isn't ready? Almost like they're framing it like, oh, you think your child is so special that they're not ready to hear about sex or
like actually
genitals.
And like that's supposed to be a derogatory term. Puritan speak.
Right. Oh, do you have to wait till they ask? What if they keep on asking questions? You're just trying to put ideas in their heads. These are literally all responses I would have.
Exactly, as any normal person would.
It's your kid. And it's like, kids are so vulnerable. Like, honestly, you could even argue that you're still a kid till you're like 20 years old. But like, kids, all they have is just survival mechanisms in place. All they want is like love and support and validation from the adults around them, and they're with their teachers most of the day, and it's you literally are operating from this place of like, what do I have to do to get validation and like acknowledgement from my teacher? A lot of it is like just parroting back what they say, saying back, repeating the talking points. Same thing with like parent times. You're just like, one kid will like lie to one parent because the other parent, they're with them more often or they're closer to them, and they're just doing whatever they have to do to get through the day because kids need their parents and need their teachers for survival. And so this is really taking advantage of that. It's
totally.
Absolutely abuse.
And it's actually also trying to isolate parents from kids in multiple ways. I mean, there's like shunning parents from like being aware of what's going on in the curriculum, and then there's also they'll say, like, one of the mothers told me this too, which I think I quoted her on in one of my pieces, where she was like, they'll say like, your parents won't understand this, they're not progressive, and like they kind of just they insinuate or tacitly say, or sometimes explicitly say, basically your parents are part of the problem that we're teaching you to be an activist. It's
arrogant.
It's honestly, it's really bad. It's really bad. It's total abducting of children in plain sight. It's like they're going home to sleep at night, but you're really just psychologically tormenting them and turning them on their parents. And it's cultural Marxism is the word. Just destroying the family structure, destroying family values, and taking a community approach to parenting. It's nobody gave you that right. And that's why, like I said, like these women are not political. They're definitely not political, but if they are anything, if the majority of the women who I've spoken to are anything, I'm serious, they're Democrats. They are all, and they're mega donors, some of them. Like these are people who are on like first name basis with Nancy Pelosi, first name basis with Kirsten Gillibrand. They're holding like high dollar fundraisers for these people, or they were, not anymore.
Wow.
They have been totally like just like black pilled by this whole experience.
Yeah. Oof. It's like, don't, when it comes to your kids, like people really
that's it. Exactly. It's like they went a bridge too far. They went for the kids.
It's so crazy. I'm going to go through some of these super chats really quick. Before you go, from Pilgrim Media, I bought my ticket for your Tampa show. All right. I'll see you there.
Congratulations, by the way. This is fantastic.
You. Nesquick, good afternoon. Hello, Nesquick. Matthew Hammond. Thinking of all the people Andrew Breitbart has spawned to become vectors of change. Ben Shapiro, James O'Keefe, Steve Bannon, Stephen Crowder, and now Emma Jo Morris. Did I miss anyone?
Yeah, God bless him. I don't think there's no one comes to mind. I mean, Peter Schweitzer is obviously at Breitbart now, and he's been in the community since its beginning. And then obviously Alex Marlow, who is the editor-in-chief, he's a huge walk toward the fire guy. I mean, we have great people at Breitbart. Honestly, it's a really great team.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Rocket Attack, thanks for the super sticker. And one more from Young Pei Chang. Despite how much teachers complain about teachers complain about not being paid enough, most of them probably push this twisted stuff for free. I think a lot of it is like control. I think a lot of it is like there is such an arrogance and a selfishness to this like cultural activism that's become really popular over the last 2 years.
Totally.
It's like actually totally useless. It's like I don't know. It's like I think it's just.
Well, that's it. It's like they can't solve problems, so like they'll just lower the standards, and then it looks like they've solved the problem.
Yeah, it's crazy. God, there's so much more. We could easily do a whole nother episode about this. So I will please come back, Emma Jo. It was so great to talk to you. Where can people find you and follow you and read your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at Breitbart.com. I have a byline there that you can find. Emma Jo NYC on Twitter for my spicy, piping hot takes. And I think that's about it. That's where you can read my stuff. You get me on Twitter uncensored, and on Breitbart you get me a little edited and more polished.
I love it. Thank you so much, guys in the chat, for your comments and questions. Until next time, bye.
Thank you.